The laptop that we already had out there was the brand new laptop, the regular one. You can purchase it at that was a new laptop that we just been over that we got. I think it was an engine. Steve and David mostly wanted to, and then she went to visit. Blair did not want to move it. Yeah. I get them out of these orders.
Best I can. Yeah, best as I can.
I know that you're doubling up on a bunch of other stuff. I'm just thinking.
I will definitely do. I mean, I don't have a ton. I just have Peterson.
Okay. Ask Lisa if we're ready. You ready? Okay.
That's all I had, right?
Oh, wow.
We're gonna get started. We're gonna start the year off right.
Do it. I love it.
Okay, everyone. We'd like to welcome you all to our South Weber City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, January the 10th, 2023, and it's 6 p.m. So we'll begin this meeting this night. I'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have a prayer by Councilman Dills. You'll all rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our kind and glorious Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that we could come here to do the work of the city, that as its representatives, we can look at the needs of the city and the needs of the residents and to use our best judgment while we make these decisions. Please bless, Father, that we will have safety and protection given to all of our armed services, for our first responders, and of course, all of the people within the city proper. This we pray for humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. It's good to have everyone here tonight. Our first meeting of the year. We look forward to having an excellent year this year, and appreciate all of you attending this evening. Yes, and you can see that we're hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have all new chambers in here, new council dais and desks over here, and it's going to be nice. Well overdue, and we're excited. So we're going to begin with a public comments. If you've got a public comment, we'd ask you to come up to the microphone, and we'll give you 3 minutes for that. State your name and your city, and we'll begin with that. Anyone? Paul, nothing? Michael, nothing? Really? Man, we are getting off to a good start this year.
Oh,
You got one, Tim? Okay.
Just a question. Tim Grubb, 6926 South, 475 East. We received a notice in the neighborhood about the Planning Commission reviewing a rezone from R7 to R5-SG. But Trevor, you indicated that there was, we talked about the date. So is that going to be rescheduled for?
It is. Yes, new notices will have been mailed today, so they should be received
So
tomorrow.
I mean, I'm planning when?
February 9th.
Not for February. Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we've got some presentations in, we'll go over next. First, we'll begin with a years of service presentation for some of our employees, and we'll turn some time over to our Fire Chief Tolman, if you'd like to come up, take care of that.
All right, thanks for giving us this opportunity to recognize two of our employees for 10 years of service. Those employees are Cole Fessler and Jake Judkins. A little bit about both of them. Both of them started on the fire department when it was all volunteer. And in fact, all three of us were in our 20s. Fire department kind of transitioned from volunteer to the staff department that we are today. And the three of us were thrust pretty quick into leadership roles. And Jake and Cole really stepped up and provided great leadership for the city when the city needed it. And they've gone above and beyond, sacrificed a lot of their time and energy, and their families have had to sacrifice a lot of their time as these two gentlemen serve our community. Cole has been great. He's kind of the catch-all for me. He does a really good job of when something needs to get done around the fire station, Cole's the guy to make that happen. And we just call him up, and next thing you know, Cole's got it taken care of. And whether it's apparatus issues, station issues, he really has taken a lot off my plate and really does a fantastic job for the citizens of South Weber. And Jake's super quiet. Those of you that don't know Jake, talking to him, he doesn't really say a lot. In fact, it was kind of funny. We used to be roommates, and before he got his hearing aids, hopefully you're okay if I tell this story. We'd be sitting there eating dinner together, and I'd tell Jake all sorts of stuff, and he wouldn't respond one single word. And I kept saying, "Dude, you're deaf, man." And sure enough, he's hearing impaired. But I had a lot of good one-on-one conversations with Jake, even though they were one way. It was a great way to kind of get to know Jake a little bit better. But in all seriousness, Jake has taken two major roles with the fire department. He takes care of all of our medical supplies ordering, and that includes meeting with reps, making sure we're getting the best equipment for the best prices that we can do. And Jake's really taken that on, taken that to heart. And he's also been instrumental in making sure when our ambulance bills and everything goes out, that he's taking care of those, and he does a lot of our quality control work to make sure when those bills hit the billing service that we use, that everything's already taken care of, and he does excellent work there. And really, I just want to have both of them come up here real quick. A little bit, hopefully that's all right. Thanks for your 10 years of service, Cole. Jake, thanks for your 10 years of service. If you want to shake the mayor and the council's hand. And as we give these two a round of applause, also give it a round of applause for their families and all the sacrifices their families have done for. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your service to the community and all the help you give to me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Tolman. We do very much appreciate all the fire department people that work and put forth the efforts that they do, keep South Weber safe. We thank you very much. Okay, our next item, we have an audit report by Kennington and Christensen. Turn the time over to a representative there.
Thanks, guys.
You guys gonna go take care of it?
You guys got things to do.
Wow.
No reflection on Gary. He must have been here for last year's audit.
Wow, that was kind of disappointing.
It's accounting.
I thought all these people came to hear an audit report, but like you said, they heard it last year and they're like, no, we're not doing that again. Yeah. Well, my name is Gary Kennington. I represent the firm of Kennington and Christensen, and we've been contracted by the city to perform the annual audit of the city's financial records. And just to remind you that the city's year goes from July 1 to June 30th. So they're on a calendar, not on a calendar year, they're more on a fiscal year. All cities are that so that they're comparable within the state of Utah. And so that if you look at financial statements for any other city, you'll know that they got the same time frame as you do. And that's good that it's uniform across the state so that you can do some comparisons. I wanted to let you know that during this audit, my responsibility is to report to you about the audit itself. The numbers that you received in those financial statements, those are the cities. My responsibility is to make sure that those numbers represent and are presented in the way the accounting records are, the accounting rules require them to be so. And so that's really what my responsibility is. And just remember that this is a financial audit. It's not an operational audit. This is just really to look at the numbers and the dollars and the financial presentation. There's many other types of audits that are out there, and sometimes people get confused on what kind of audits we're required to do. And if you want other kinds of audits, you can always hire for that. The state requires that you actually have a financial audit. So tonight, I just need to report to you how the audit went, and I'm going to put on my glasses. I feel old. But that's okay. I looked around the room. There was a lot of people with glasses today, so I'm okay. I wanted to let you know that you have an excellent staff, and I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that very often, because most of the time I go to places, it's not that good. And I'm very impressed with your management. Mark does a tremendous job. I can call him even when he's at home. When we're doing the audit, he's responsive. Doesn't matter what day it is. Even on a Sunday, once in a while, he'll answer my questions, or on a Saturday or late at night. We're still having conversations. And so he's very, very responsive. And your management team, your city manager, this year we had to have a special issue that I needed his help with, in the fact that you had to go out to you have a payroll service. So now I have to audit somewhat that payroll service, instead of, we used to be able to just audit what you had in your own accounting, your own payroll. Well, now I have to make sure that those people are doing things right, because you take those numbers and you put those in your financial statements, and they did a great job of coordinating that and getting that, and you got the staff together, explained to them what they needed to get done. And within less than a day, I had the information. I thought it was going to take them a week to get. They really went out there and got it to me within a day, which was amazing that they were able to do that. So hats off to all of you. Did a fantastic job this year. During the audit, we did not have any kind of disputes or any of those kind of things during the audit. We didn't have to contact any other CPA firm to see if there was an issue that we ran into an issue that we didn't agree on. None of those kind of things happened. One thing we did have to do new this year, so that you're aware of it, is that there's a new audit, there's a new accounting standard on leasing. And so that changed a lot on how the presentation of your leases. So that what happens now is they had to go back and redo a lot of the accounting on them, because for your budget and the council, you have to be able to see that those payments are being paid. You got a budget for those payments, right? Well, but in the accounting standards, we turn around and we're saying, well, that's a liability, so that should be on the balance sheet. So Mark's had to do both sides of it. He had to make it so that you guys could see it and it would work in the budget, but then turn around and convert it so that when we come in to audit it, it makes it so that the audit's right. So they kind of conflict, but he had to do two sets of that. And there's quite a few leases out there, especially in the vehicles. You started a new fund, internal service fund, to have the leases for those vehicles. And that's where all that came from. And so not only did we have leases, but we had to add an entire new fund. And if you look at those financial statements, they're a bit confusing how those come in. And if you ever really want to know how that gets accumulated back in, because it's really all internal, right? Internal service fund. So you have to eliminate it all. How that gets done, I had one mayor ask me, how's it done? And he wanted to go over the accounting. He was a CPA, so of course he wanted to be able to figure this out, but I'm not going to bore you with all that, how it goes. I'm not sure you really want to do that. But it's in there correctly.
Still wouldn't understand.
But it's in there correctly. And so that's a new thing that you would see in your financial statements. The one thing I would encourage you to do is that if you have those financial statements, there's a lot of information there, and I really like it, and Mark really likes it, and others maybe. But I'd encourage you just to read that MD&A, or Management Discussion Analysis. That gives you a comparative of what's going on, kind of gives you an executive summary of what went on during the year, and that's only, 10 pages. You can probably get through some of that. And there's a lot of charts and stuff like that in there. So that's something you can color pictures, actually. You'll like that. Yeah. And so I would just encourage you to look at that. The other thing is to just, glance down once in a while, look to see what the assets are. Maybe also look at debt, different things. You don't have a whole lot of debt, so that's not a big number. A lot of cities do have a lot of debt, and the council should need to know that information. So I'd encourage you to look over that. The opinion that we gave on those financial statements is an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion you can get, meaning that we don't have any modifications that need to be done to the financial statements that have to be in compliance with the accounting standards. So it's a good, clean report. Also, as part of our audit, we have to look at compliance. The state requires us to look at some state compliance issues. And there's a report in there, and it lists all the different areas that we had to look at. One of the areas we had to look at is the budget area. And we have one non-compliance issue in all of the things we looked at. And that has to do with that in the storm sewer fund, the actual expenses exceeded the budget by about $69,000. And the reason that happened is because of depreciation. That fund has depreciation. It's like a business fund, so it carries its own assets. It has to be depreciated. The budget number on the depreciation wasn't enough to cover what was the actual number once we were started into the audit and got the real number. And so that caused the overage there. Not a huge deal. That's not a non-cash one. It's more important if there was cash things were out, but it's not in compliance. I needed to report that to you. So in all the things that we did, looking at compliance, your internal controls, all the questions we had to go through, we didn't have any other findings. And I'd be amiss if I didn't say that the court, we have to make sure the court has a lot of controls, and she does a great job. She passes with flying colors, even though we try to catch her, but there's not much to catch there. She does a great job. So that's the only finding I have to report to you. If you have any other questions about the audit, I'm glad to answer them.
Anyone?
I'm afraid.
Well, thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Good job, staff. It's a good to get a report like that. And yes, staff, we appreciate it very much, all the hard effort you put into your work. Thank you.
Absolutely.
The next item, Davis and Weber County Canal Company, secondary water rates.
Hello, my name is Rick Smith. I'm the Davis Weber County Canal Company General Manager. I replace Ivan Ray, which probably most of you know who that is. I know he's infamous here in South Florida. He's a great friend of mine. So, Davis Weber County Canal Company, we've served a very small section of South Weber, up to almost 100 connections. So it's not a huge portion of your city, but we do have a small area that we do serve. So in the recent past, we've been working on a secondary water rate study or analysis with Lewis, Young, Robertson, and Birmingham. And she's pulling up my presentation for you real quick as we go on there. And I will click on this as soon as it's ready. I'll quickly jump across a couple slides if it comes up there. There it goes. Okay. So just quickly, I'll just go over some background items, and then Fred will do the next 4 things. So Fred fill pot with Lewis, Young, Robertson, and Birmingham. As you all know, the last few years has been interesting with drought. We are doing better right now. As you can see, the current status of water in the reservoirs and snowpack is doing better than last few years. But we're trying not to count our chickens until they hatch. And so if you remember last January and February just basically plateaued and there was no precipitation. So we're hoping that has changed and we'll have some additional rain and snow, as you obviously see today that we're getting some today. Storage in Echo is 63%, and then in East Canyon 57%. So I always try to remind people that the water is kind of free, right? Mother Nature provides us the water. It's that getting the water down to the end user, diversion, canal, secondary system that we have to collect funds for. This is kind of an overview of our capital improvement plan expenditures in the near future. There's some impacts by UDOT on some projects that we have to pay for, as well as secondary metering, which is a big chunk of this. And then in the future, actually replacing that system that we do have. So again, we're looking way out into the 2050 era. Currently, we have 3,900 meters in our system. We have roughly over 16,500 connections between 5 different cities. So the 100 in South Weaver is a small portion of it, but it is part of our overall system. And then since 2016, they talk about, again, if people knew how much they were using, they try to conserve more. And I think we've definitely seen voluntary conservation over the last several years. Last year, now that's last year, 2022, House Bill 242 passed, which requires us to meter everything by the end of 2029, which is quite a feat for Davis and Weaver. We have roughly 13,000 connections that we need to meter. So that's upwards of almost $40 million in today's dollars. So we'll see how that goes. We have been securing ARPA or state funds to do that. As mentioned, we're continually investing in our system, trying to maintain it and provide a service, the level of service to the residents that we do serve. And our fee schedule actually hasn't changed since 2011. So it's been basically 12 years since we've changed these rates. And so it is time, and especially due to the outside forces with the state mandates, we definitely need to do it today. So we have been doing this rate study over the last several months. It's been a very iterative process, and it's very complex. But again, the main components is operation maintenance, capital improvements, secondary metering, and then the repair and replacement, looking into the future. And we have been using state loans again to build the system, as well as to do repairs. We get state loans, so we're not having to spend $2 million all at once. We spread that out over time, which is a great partner in all of our system. So with that, I will turn the time over to Fred just on the financial side of things.
Thank you for having me this evening. I've got a couple slides to review the model that we developed and to go over the financial aspects relative to those elements that Rick spoke of. I've done quite a few rate studies looking at water utilities, sewer enterprise funds, storm, refuse. The objective of those studies, what we're looking at, is trying to ensure revenue sustainability and that we can meet certain targets within the enterprise fund. In this case, what we're looking at is the cash available at the end of each fiscal year, as well as the debt coverage ratio, or the net revenues available for the covering of the debt service payment. As Rick mentioned, the metering project is resulting in future debt scenarios that we had to consider with regards to the state loans, as well as grant monies, and then the utilization of existing fund balance that the company has. So what we looked at is, again, the revenue sustainability, the cash reserves, and that debt service coverage ratio for the company as a whole. And then we also evaluated the specific member cities relative to operational costs and the potential revenue stream to evaluate our rate structure. It's important to note that when we go through these types of studies, we're making assumptions with regards to the future, and often those assumptions can shift. Additional revenues can be identified, or construction inflation can impact entities, as we've seen over the last several years. Those types of inflationary pressures can cause the assumptions to morph. As a result, we recommend a review of these types of studies every 2 to 5 years, or if something big happens like a recession, it may trigger an update, a more immediate update. Alrighty, so our scenario analysis focused on establishing a baseline and then looking at potential rate increases to achieve the objectives that were described. Based on the capital need, that's the primary factor that's influencing this model, is the substantial capital investment that is needed to do the metering program. As a result of that, you can see here the projected days of cash on hand fall below our target and go negative. There just isn't enough revenue within the within the model to sustain that capital investment and the needed metering program. The debt coverage, that stays above our target for a few years. It drops below that target, but stays above 1x coverage. But again, what we're trying to achieve is 1.25 times coverage at a minimum. So that if we can get a little bit better than that, then that's good for the enterprise fund. It helps with future debt transactions if those are needed. So the do nothing approach is not feasible. We had to look at taking action so that we could mitigate the decline in our cash balance. So scenario 2, what we looked at is increasing rates to promote sustainability. There are several projects that we looked at, UDOT projects that were spread over the entire service area rather than allocating those to specific service areas within the company. And that's based on the policy that the company has done that in the past, that capital investment has been borne by all users within the system. And so we maintained that and spread those specific capital projects over everybody. And then all of our O&M costs, we look at cost of service study relative to those to determine how those might be allocated between the service areas. And surprisingly, there's actually pretty similar cost per unit for each of the service areas relative to that operational component. We were anticipating a little bit more difference, but when we allocated those costs between the service areas, it actually came to be roughly proportionate. So here, scenario 2, this is the needed rates. You can see by increasing rates, we still utilize our cash balance, and that drops, but it rebounds as a result of the changing nature of the capital improvement plan. Our debt coverage ratio stays above the target as well. So our proposed recommendation as a result of that analysis, what we're looking at is these rates here. So the rates are proposed to continue to be based on lot size, based on utilization. So we've made assumptions with regards to water utilization based on lot sizes here. So looking at a 3rd-acre lot, the rate for a 1-inch connection would be $313, and it goes up based on lot size. Similar to the same ratios that the current schedule is for South Weber. This illustrates the percentage increase. So that 3rd-acre lot, the existing rate right now is $272, and that's on an annual basis. So this represents the fee per year. That the $313 is a 15% increase. So we're going from $272 up to $313. When you get up into the larger lots, that percentage increase is a little bit higher. And by policy, the company board capped the increase at 25%. So we didn't allow any rates to go above a 25% increase. You can see the larger lot sizes, those were capped at that 25%. I'll also point out that the model projects potential future rate adjustments. However, that would fall to the arena of future model adjustments or revisions. So what we've discussed with the board is looking at the performance of this proposed rate schedule relative to the metering program, and then revising that model as costs become more clear and we can see the outcome of this policy.
Fred, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is there a desire to change the rates as meters are put in, or wait until the whole system is metered and then change the rate structure for everybody?
So right now, again, it's basically a flat rate right now, but the plan, and again, my assumption is it'll probably become a state mandate. Then we'll have to change that fee schedule to a tiered base or based on use. So right now it's going to be a flat rate, but in the past,
Even those that are metered at this point, for the foreseeable
It'll be a-
future will be a flat rate until.
Yeah, and the past discussions with our attorney was saying, everyone has to be treated fairly. Now, again, if we completely meter all of South Weber, then we could say, okay, in South Weber, we may base it off of that, but we're trying to be somewhat equitable across the board.
I know it's
Again,
a transition.
we're supposed to be done by 2030 or end of 29. My hunch is that the state will probably mandate that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Or fortunately, that's how you look at it.
Rick, I had a couple questions for you too, actually. So what is your timeline, do you think, for meters in South Weber specifically?
I do not have a specific date. It may be in the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years, is what I'd say.
Okay,
We're trying to get
also,
close to 2,000 a year that we're trying to install. So you can think about that kind of challenge.
yeah,
I talked to some other entities, I was at Layton City last Thursday, and they're talking about doing 800 a year, and I'm going, we're doing more than 2, almost 3 times that a year. So yes, it's a challenge.
definitely. Okay, and this rate is, does this affect the stockholders or is this your renter rate? Just,
So this is for the secondary water users specifically. So again, there's almost 100 connections in South Weber that we serve in that Byron Park Estates and Easton Village, if I recall those 2 names. So that's 2 areas that we serve right now. So it just affects those 100 people.
okay, and me, but
You and Lynn.
I'm not over there. Okay, that's why I'm asking. Okay,
But not
Um,
shareholders, that's the assessment with us,
right,
water shares. But
okay,
that did go up slightly this year as well.
all right. No, that's it. I'd love to know, what time frame when you get that nailed down for South Weber, so we can kind of get their.
Yeah, we'll be in coordination with the city. We
Okay,
try to stay
Thank
in
you.
contact with staff.
thank
So
you.
again, just so you know, we will be sending these bills out in February is typically our billing cycle, which we bill the actual homeowners on our end. And then on the next steps on city council action, again, our agreement with you, we have a rate schedule, but I think in there it says, okay, we need to make sure we cover our costs. So this is more of a let you know and acknowledge that. And I don't know if we need to technically do any action, but that is up to you, I guess.
Just one, maybe you can inform everybody. There's a misconception out there that the state basically is paying for House Bill 252. How much funding, out of your 40 million, how much funding did you get from the grant program?
So thus far, we've got $10 million.
That's what I said. They cap you at $10 million.
At $10 million cap. We're trying to, I was heavily involved with the legislation and trying to change that percentage to make it equitable across the board, that everyone gets 70%, because we just talked to Layton City last Thursday and they're going, oh, we got our 70% of our project paid for, but they're $5 million. Well, for us, we need 2 or 3 rounds of these. So we did actually apply recently for additional funding and we haven't heard back yet. So we hoped again, and again, one of those assumptions, we assumed we didn't get another grant. So we can collect enough without the grant, but if it does show up, then we won't have to change rates into the future. But again, that's an unknown.
It is.
So
And
I
they're
just had
not
a question on, on your chart, you had it for lots, I think 3/4 an acre to 1 acre, but then that's where it stopped. Do you not have users that are on more of at 1 acre or
No, we do not in South
everybody
Weber.
is? Oh,
I
in South
think
Weber.
the agricultural isn't required the same, Tim. So I can see it. The wheels were turning over there.
We're not a secondary water user
You don't-
from us, right? You provide your canal
And your-
water to you, right?
And your
But
shareholders.
you're not a South Weaver secondary water from us,
Yeah,
even though it's like that, because you have your own private ditch company.
so different.
For such a small city, our water is really weird. Like,
It's very
it's really
complex.
We have
confusing.
4 different suppliers.
Yeah,
Well, this whole region is,
yeah.
we had that discussion the other day too, going, can't you guys do what Weaver Basin does? Well, we all have different water portfolios, and so
Yeah.
that's where it's a little different.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
You bet.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, appreciate it.
Video, did we lose our video?
Just for a minute.
Our next item, I don't see Commissioner Davis here, so do you know what's happening with that?
I reached out to him. I haven't heard from him, so.
So we'll move on. So then our next item is general RV incentives. Before we have them come up, we're gonna have Dave come up and explain some of these incentives to us to kind of give us an idea on what we're dealing with.
Mayor asked me to just do a quick overview of how this works, this program of tax increment financing, how how public investment can be made for these types of projects. And so I just want to take a couple of minutes, not a long time, to hopefully set the stage about how TIF, tax increment financing, works, and lay that foundation a little bit. It's an economic development tool that hits the target of having the city have the ability to help. I'm gonna stop right there. I'm doing a lot of rambling. The whole goal of economic development is to reduce the tax burden on the residences, right? By having commercial property and commercial sales tax increase and not be so reliant on individual residential property tax. And so the idea of TIF is one tool in a city's toolbox to help make that type of thing happen. But the main point of a TIF is that you are using the money that is generated from the project. It's not any dollars that the city has right now. We're not writing a check or things out of current city funds. The idea is that the project will create new tax revenue that then is used as a reimbursement or a rebate to the project developers, because they are taking that initial step, and it helps to make sure that that project is able to move forward. Whether or not the project happens without the tax increment financing is kind of up to the developer to express those financials. But that's the idea, that the public can invest into the project essentially to make sure that it's successful or help it to be more successful, and provide additional benefit to the community. So just quick overview, right? The idea is that vacant land becomes developed land, which increases the amount of property tax value on that property, and that the city would be taking a portion of that amount of money to give back to the project developer to make that happen. This is a really rudimentary chart, but I think that it identifies how TIF works really well. That right now there's a certain amount of value that the project area, that the property develops, and that's at the blue line at the bottom where it says today, and it has 100 is just an illustrative number that's totally made up. But that base valuation is currently what's happening. We're only talking about the new money. The yellow area shows that incremental tax growth over time. So that's the increment word, right? Tax increment. And then once the tax increment financing project area ends, in this case, they're requesting 10 years, that then the remainder of that value would all be the city's. So there's a couple different ways, before we get to that, actually. I know that the state law changed last year regarding these types of programs and incentives. And we all heard when that was happening that it was taken off the table and that it was not something that cities could do. However, there are a handful of exceptions, and we're highlighting the one that this falls under. Their retail square footage is 17,000 that they're proposing, and it specifically has this exemption of a square footage on the first floor of under 20,000. So that's the exemption that we're all targeting. Legal's taking a look at that. I know their legal's taking a look at that, and from a staff perspective, we're comfortable with that exemption. This is the specific request that they made. I'll let them talk about the specifics and make the official request that way. But any questions about how kind of the program works? There are other moving pieces and other details about how the project area is created in specific steps. But overall, as a post-performance type of a financing tool, not current city funds that are being used. Any questions about that?
I do have a question on tax incentive. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to verify, this is on property tax only, correct? So sales tax that is still generated is still collected through the city or through the county, and then.
Yeah, their specific request had 3 elements. And as you can see, one of those was the property tax for 10 years. And that's where the TIF mostly falls under. The other 2 are not exactly the TIF.
Okay.
Yeah. But sales tax was not part of the request, at least the letter that we received.
With that, Aon program that we got, do we have an estimate of what those property taxes would be over those 10-year span?
We haven't looked at that yet, no.
Would that be something that it could generate for us, so we could have an idea of what that would be?
Yeah. In order to do the project area, we would have to estimate what those amounts would be, and you'll end up having an agreement essentially in place, and all of that would be spelled out within the agreement.
So the other question I have is just to confirm your comment that it's all future money. So if for some unforeseen reason, after 5 years, they go under, they're not here, whatever, the city is not behind. It's all future costs, like impact fees, infrastructure, all those other things that we would be putting in, would we lose out?
The agreements that I've seen in the past for this type of program all include that post-performance idea, right? That it's not city money. It's all money that's generated from the project. Sometimes they'll have, up to a certain amount. In this case, it's a specific time period. But of course, if they're no longer there, then there's no longer an incentive, and we'd make sure that.
Right, but we're not paying up front on the future. It's all after.
Right. We're not paying them that money now.
Right.
It's as it's generated, there's a mechanism in place that the taxes would be collected and then they would be given back to the amount agreed upon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question. Okay, I'll turn it over to them.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave. That was actually a really good explanation, and I'll attempt to try and make a complicated issue a little bit simpler for everybody here today. But first of all, can I just say, this seems like a really great community. I don't think I've ever been to a more warm, welcoming, energetic city council meeting. I walked in and there were firefighters joking around and being jovial. So anyway, I had numerous people introduce themselves to me. So it seems like a really wonderful community to be a part of. So good evening, I'm Jessica Rancy. I'm an attorney. I'm with Curtin and McConkie, and I'm obviously representing General RV today. It sounds like you're all somewhat familiar with the project, but I'll kind of maybe go through a few details today just to refresh your memory, and feel free to stop me as I go if you like. But so obviously the proposal is to build a project along 6650 South and 475 East, what's known, I believe, as Old Fort Road. And obviously it's 18 acres they're anticipating purchasing for the purpose of building an RV sales center. So it will include a service center and a retail center. And they're hoping to develop that they're hoping to commence construction by the spring of 2023. So hopefully quickly. As I understand it, the project's already gone through a concept review and one round of planning commission comments. And I understand it's been received very favorably, and they're working really well and making some good progress. So that's really positive. My client is really excited about this project. It seems like a really great location for the project, a really great city. They've looked at the demographics and the location, and they think that this is a really good place for what they're hoping to develop. To give you a brief overview of the project, there are actually three main components. Like I said, that from a business perspective, there will be the retail sales center. That sales center alone is expected to generate over $100 million worth of revenue annually. The second aspect is the service center, and the service center is kind of a unique portion to commercial development generally, but this has that aspect in it, and it's expected to employ over 100 employees with an average salary of $70,000 a year, which is a great income, especially, it's will hopefully increase the median average in the area. And finally, as part of the service center, it's also going to offer specialized training and education through the RV Technical Institute. So it will be educating its employees, which will hopefully be another benefit to the city. From the city's perspective, we hope that the city can see some of the benefits that this will provide. Obviously the sales tax is the benefit and probably the number one benefit, but we also think that it will attract really great educated employees to the area, hopefully educate some other people in the area. hopefully generate some other new developments possibly, and maybe draw in some other services that aren't currently in this city, and potentially raise property taxes as it goes. So we hope that that will be the benefit that it provides to the city, and we do think that it will provide each of those benefits. But as you probably know, there's not a whole lot of commercial development within South Weber currently. And I think there are a number of constraints that have caused that, geographically, some other things in the area. But from General RV's perspective, the constraint that they're facing right now is obviously the high cost of developing. So the purpose of tonight's meeting and discussing this with you is to look at some of those constraints and see if the city has an appetite to help work through those things with us to accomplish a project that will hopefully be beneficial to General RV and to the city.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you mean the high cost of developing here in the city?
Well, we'll go through those. There are
Okay,
three
you'll have
apps.
some numbers on
That's
it.
basically the three apps that we have. And that's right into my next point. The three costs of developing that are kind of costing out this project right now, preventing it from being able to move forward quicker, is so hopefully, as we mentioned, there's a request for a tax abatement for 10 years to help with the cost. There's impact fees that are currently owed on the project. I'm not actually aware of what those costs are yet. I'm waiting to get some feedback from the city on what those impact fees are currently, but as I understand it, there are some impact fees that are currently owed due to some other projects and developments that have gone in the area. And then the other request is the cost of public infrastructure, and some of that infrastructure is pretty expensive, which I'll talk about a little bit as well. So those are the three costs that we're hoping to work through with the city. We've looked really closely at each of these, and with some of the proposals that I'll also go through, we think that each one of them is very doable, and we can accomplish a plan and move forward with a plan that will be beneficial to both General RV and hopefully to the city. It won't cost the city a whole lot of money out of its current general budget. So, so those are the three. So just to give you a quick example though, so those may sound like large asks, but we had a look at the numbers, and this is obviously very rough figures. But if we believe that the sales tax revenue alone that the city would generate from this project would compensate the city for the costs of these incentives within just 4 years. So if we assume that the city, if this project generates $70 million in the first year, 85 in the second year, 100 in the third year, and 104.5 in the fourth year, that would be approximately $3.6 million in revenue there, and it would essentially pay off the incentives. As we've obviously made some assumptions about the impact fees and the taxes there, but that's a very realistic number, that it could be paid off pretty quickly. So there are a number of ways that we could accomplish some solutions to these asks. Obviously, the first is really if the city decides to provide a waiver of impact fees and the tax abatements, and then provide a reimbursement for the cost of the infrastructure. I don't want to make too many assumptions, but a lot of cities don't like to pay for these kinds of things up front and don't necessarily have the budget. But if that's something the city is willing to do, speak up and we'll go that direction. But typically the way that cities handle this is through what's called an RDA, which Dave outlined a little bit about how they work the TIFs and things. But I'll kind of just do a little bit of an overview myself, hopefully kind of cement some of these principles in, and you can ask questions as I go and see if this is something that will work for the city. But as I understand it, the city doesn't currently have an active RDA in place. Most cities do, but I understand this one doesn't, or at least I heard yesterday from your city attorney that you actually do have one set up. It just hasn't been functioning or active yet. And so this would be probably, if we moved in this direction, utilizing that RDA that you set up several years ago and for this purpose. So for the benefit of the city council and just to kind of overview what an RDA is, So redevelopment in the city, it's essentially a set of tools that the state code has allowed the cities to utilize to revitalize areas to promote economic development within a region. And so what they've done is they've created 3 different kinds of RDAs. There is an urban agency RDA, an economic development, or there is community development. Because of the nature of this particular project, I actually think we could utilize any one of those RDAs. We would fall into any of them. One's kind of centered on job growth. One is centered on just community development, and another one is property home prices. So I think any 3 of the categories would work. I think the one that fits the best is probably economic development because of the job aspect, the employment aspect that this project would bring to the area. But regardless of which category we use, we can work out the details of that a little bit later on. But generally speaking, the way that it works is the city will define a development area. So you'll work with the city and come up with an area that needs to be revitalized, that you want to utilize for this particular process. And then the city will also come up with a development plan. And this is all done by the city council. So the development plan will outline the powers that it will then grant to this agency. So you will delegate these powers to the agency. Keep in mind that the same body that serves on the RDA agency that administers the agency is the city council. So it's all the same people. But those powers are delegated to the RDA so that the RDA can then implement these tools. The most common tools that are used and delegated, and the ones that would probably apply in this particular situation, would be that you can assign the right to invest in infrastructure. You can assign the right to pay for impact fees. You can provide for tax abatements, and then you can also utilize tax increment financing, which Dave went into a little bit about the detail about. So the RDA, so just to explain a little bit more about tax increment financing, he did a really great job, but just to also explain that the way that it works is that you would look at the value of the property right now. You look at what you're receiving on the property right now, and then what you expect to receive on the property as a result of the project. And then that additional tax that you would receive as a result of that, you can then go out and issue a bond. Somebody would purchase the bond, you would get that money, and then you could use that money to invest in the infrastructure, to pay for the impact fees, and to do all these other things. And then that bond is paid off through the additional taxes that you do receive as a result of the project. So again, it's not out of pocket, and it is fees that are coming into or taxes and assessments that are coming into the city as a result of the project. And again, we expect that it would be paid off within 4 years. And then after those 4 years, you would have the ongoing benefit of the sales tax and the increase in the property tax and whatever else has come as a positive benefit of the project. So hopefully
Jessica, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as where's my note? Infrastructure. So paying off, the proposal would be to have the tax TIF, what is it called?
Tax increment financing.
Thank you. So have that paid off within 4 years. Is there a similar agreement or time frame that you would have for the infrastructure to be paid off? Because you're specifically referring just to the tax portion, correct?
I'm not sure I completely understood your question. The way that it would work is, honestly, it would take as long as it needed to pay off the bond. It's just paid out of that difference. So potentially could take longer. We just expect that it will only take that short of time based on the projected sales revenue that we believe the city will
Okay,
receive.
so for clarification, maybe to restate it more clear, the 3 incentives you're requesting, all 3 of those would you anticipate being repaid within 4 years?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, let me also clarify that the tax abatement we expect, essentially it's a waiver of the taxes. So that wouldn't be repaid. You would just waive the taxes.
Correct.
On that piece. And then the other 2, yes, we expect that those would be repaid. Through
Can
the
I ask
idea.
a clarifying question?
Yep, go ahead.
Because you've talked about the option of the bonding and then repaying the bond.
Mm-hmm.
Or are we talking about the payments over time paying it. So, and I guess that's a detail that we would have to work out, but are you looking for an upfront payment through bonding and then the increment pays the bond, or are you looking for those payments over time directly to you?
I guess that is a detail that we haven't fully worked out yet. I think either way, it would be essentially using those taxes to pay for the infrastructure, whether it's a reimbursement to the client or whether it's a reimbursement to the person, the entity that purchased the bond. So I'm not 100% sure yet. Those are kind of in the finer details, and I think possibly either would work in this situation. Just yeah, the typical way to do it is to issue the bond, and that way the money is there up front to pay for the infrastructure. I think the client would be open to a reimbursement agreement instead in lieu of that, but we probably tonight's proposal was more to see if there was an appetite to go down this road. It is a little bit of a lengthy process. Typically it takes about 18 months to put something like this together, and we're anxious to get moving and hoping it doesn't take that long. There is some room in the code to allow for the city council to expedite things, and so our hope would be that things would be expedited as quickly as possible, so that we could get moving on it. But again, it's really to see whether the city council wants to go down this path and whether this is something that you agree would be beneficial for the city, and if so, we'll start to work towards some solutions. We think it's all doable. We think it will be a great benefit to both parties, but also want to hear the feedback from the city council. And
I'm going to jump in before Haley does with one more question.
go ahead.
Okay. The 18-month time frame you just said for the process, is that typically when the option to bond is utilized, or would that be if General RV is willing to negotiate something different?
Yeah, that's a good question. The bond aspect would probably add some time, but I think the real issue with the time is when you create the RDA, you also need to work with the taxing authorities to get approval to do certain things. And I think that takes a little bit of time. Plus there are certain notice requirements, public hearings that are involved as a part of the process as well.
Okay.
So yes, it would add a little bit of time, but I don't think that would be, I think it would be the taxing authority portion that would require the most.
Okay.
Can I I'll add a little bit of detail to that. So when you move forward with the redevelopment area, you have to provide notice to all of the taxing entities that tax within that area. The city's a portion, the county's a portion, the school district. There may be a few other smaller entities that take a portion of that property tax and receive it. And then we have to decide whether the request for abatement from the developer is for the city portion only or for all of the property tax abatement. If it's for all of the property tax abatement, then there's a notice process and then the ability for each of those entities to say yes or no to the city's request that those taxes be abated. And so that takes a little bit of time.
Right.
And then if bonding's part of the equation, where the city has an established RDA, but not an active RDA and no established development area, then you'd not only have to do what I just described about establishing the development area and then getting permission from the other taxing entities within that area, but you have to then get rated to issue bonds and then go to market with those bonds. So you'd have a little bit lengthier process there. I'm not sure this is the kind of project that would require you to go to market and to get bonds, but we would need to work through those details and I think understand kind of the finer points of the ask. And I think the purpose of the conversation today largely was to educate the council on how an RDA functions, what it would mean for the city, kind of broad brush, big picture. And I appreciate Jessica and her client being here to help fill in some of the details on their request and what we're looking at, but then to kind of take your temperature on whether you want to begin the process of considering those things. I think their representation generally of how sales tax revenues at a certain point in time will eclipse what you've abated in property tax and other things, plays out, and you can see that in other cities in the area. We'd have to do the math on the specifics of this project. I don't know that we have all of the inputs yet to do that math until we understand kind of what the impact fees are and then can verify their estimates on sales tax and other things. But
the principles do work and function well in other cities, and I just wanted to be sure we could answer your questions about how that process would work generally, so we can get some direction of how to move forward on this particular proposal.
Thank you, Jamie.
So Jamie brought up one of my biggest questions, or first questions, was the property tax abatement ask. Is that for all the property taxes or for the city's portion? He didn't clarify that in the.
Yes, and again, it's more in the finer details. I think in talking to Dave a little bit earlier today, I was trying to figure out what the breakdown of the property tax would be, and it sounds like the majority of it is not necessarily governed by the city, and so in order to make the project worth it, I think the ask would have to include all of the property taxes. So it would take more time, essentially. I haven't discussed that in depth with my client yet, but I would imagine that would be the case in order for the numbers to work out. Yeah.
And you would do the ask to each of those entities concurrently. So you establish the project area and then you go out to all of them. And then the city would, or it wouldn't be the city, it would be the RDA. But the RDA board is the city council and the mayor acts as chair of the board. So it's a different legal entity, but it's the same composition as the city council. So you all as members of the RDA board would then enter into an agreement, the RDA with those different taxing entities, to dedicate for a certain period of time their portion of the sales tax or of the property tax to this project.
Yep. And I think you're fortunately positioned right now because I think your city manager and city attorney have actually a great deal of experience setting these up in structuring them. A lot of cities already have them in place, so you've got some expertise on your hands, which I think will be helpful if you decide to go down this route.
Angie asked my question, so.
So, I mean, I have a few questions, and maybe it's more related, and maybe we don't want to get into these details, but my questions are more around the development costs.
The infrastructure costs.
Well, yeah, what you're calling infrastructure.
Mhm. Yep.
I guess there's a $244,000 number for irrigation piping.
Mhm.
And I'm curious what that is, because irrigation piping is stubbed into the property. It was already paid for and done. And all you're doing is running sprinklers in some park strips.
I may need to.
So I mean, that number
just,
just, and that's why I mean, I don't know who wants to, if we want to get into those details, or, I mean, because.
I mean, if it will be helpful, we're happy to discuss them.
The other one, I mean, and we can get to the bigger one, and everybody's probably got the same exact question I do. The $1.1 million for the CMU wall.
Yeah.
Well, we just call for a firewall. If you do what the rest of everybody's done down 84, it's $76 a lineal foot. You'd be about 150 grand. I went and measured the whole thing.
So
that number just is a really hard number for me. Or we just say we don't need
well,
it.
we're more than happy to hear that. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't want to spend $100 million on a firewall if we don't need to.
Well, you weren't, because you were asking for us to. So, I mean, right off the bat.
We need the city council to approve. I mean, it's a requirement of the code that it goes in. That's why it's in there.
But not that kind of wall.
I believe the CMU wall was, but if you're saying it's not, that's actually,
It's a fire resistant wall.
we're more than happy to.
All the way down the whole.
Yeah, you're both right on this one. So Jessica phoned me.
Our city engineer probably designed it and gave it to you, so.
I guess here's the way I think of it is the city code requirement has the default of a firewall. And if you were to build that, I think it is roughly at the cost they're estimating, but it allows for that requirement to be waived or reduced. And so you could do like everybody has what Blair's discussing, and it's a much cheaper option, and that cost just goes away.
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page with that issue. We would be more than happy to build a wall that doesn't cost $1 million. So if that's the city council's, is there an agreement with that? I think we need approval from the city council in order to do that. So
I mean, we'd rather waive it and let you build what you want there.
that's good news. We'll take
That's
that.
my opinion. I
Yeah,
said we.
he's like, yeah,
But if everybody's in agreement with what we allowed all the way up 84.
Tell the
what was
spokesman of the
just
city
allowed,
council.
Just an additional perspective, we reviewed this with Derek Tolman, our fire chief. He suggested that he is fine with whatever solution they would provide because the intent of the code is to provide protection from fire and vehicular impact to the property because the property will, the only liability is that own property itself, and there's going to be acres of asphalt that it does provide some buffer from fire and from vehicular traffic. So the code says that we can waive or reduce if we find that there's no impact to fire or vehicular impact. So just
I'd defer to the fire chief before I would defer.
Well, I'm not going to argue with this discussion at all. We're happy to take that reduction in the infrastructure cost. That would be great. So,
I concur as well. I just want to give Blair a hard time.
If I may, I think all of the kind of request is a negotiation, right? It's a conversation, you know, they're stating what they would like and the council has every opportunity to respond and again, ask questions. I think you're
So
on
I have a
track there.
question on if this were to be something that the council favors, is the bond process the best way for us financially to go forward with that? Or is that something we can talk about? Or give,
My initial glance at that would be our preferred method would most likely be the repayment over time rather than go through the bond process. I think it's
Okay.
faster, maybe not to get the money directly, right? You probably want money in hand more quickly. So if they're willing to do that process and have the payments direct rather than the bonding, I think that's probably preferred on our end, but either one is just two options to accomplish the same thing. So
yeah.
we'd have to look at the pros and cons, probably depending on the cost estimates and all of those things, if it makes sense.
But if you get rid of the 1.1 million, it's not
right,
even a great big number anymore.
Yeah. it's
And I
a
think
little
if
bit
we
more
could see some
manageable.
justification to the other numbers. I mean, because the next biggest number is the 244, and that's what I do. I'm really struggling with that one.
Yeah, come in, speak to that. That would be great.
Yep.
How you doing?
Good.
Good to meet you, Brian.
Yep.
Council, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kevin Shonchik. I'm with South Weber LLC, who will be the buyer of the property, will be the developer. General RV will be the user tenant. The irrigation in question is not actually sprinkler system. We're talking about the irrigation canal that follows the north property line along 84. And basically what we're doing with that is we're going to relocate that to the true north property line and encase it in some kind of piping, whether it's 24 inch, 36 inch. I think maybe Brandon and
That's the Riverdale ditch.
Yes, that's the Riverdale Bench Canal.
Okay.
And I think they had given direction that if it was to be piped, it needed to be 36 inch.
so there's a little bit more to it than maybe what we initially thought when we were just discussing it a moment ago, but certainly we had our engineer take a look at what the cost would be, and that was their number. So based on our local engineers' thoughts. So
can you go over the new sidewalk and walking path? Is that for which, where is that going at? On 475?
in our general plan, there's a trail connection in the rear of the property.
Oh,
And
that
then
kind of
there's
trail.
a sidewalk in the front of the property. As we've discussed with the developer, we think it makes the most sense to create a wider sidewalk trail system at the front of the property rather than bringing the trail behind the property. And so it's requiring a larger sidewalk width on that front to satisfy those requirements.
On 475? Is that what you're talking
On Old Fort.
Old Fort. A little bit on
Instead of going on the
475.
north side, it would be on their south side.
about? Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Essentially moving the trail down on the roadside
So
rather than the north.
it's not a trail, it's just a sidewalk?
It'll be a sidewalk
basically-
and trail combined. They'll have adjacent uses and it'll have landscaping that's gonna,
Would that be above and beyond our current standard for sidewalks?
yes,
Well, what if we just leave it as just a sidewalk?
we can just leave it as a 6-foot sidewalk and do a.
Wait, I'm
road
not,
trail.
I'm not really grasping the concept
was
of
saying
a
two-
sidewalk.
two-
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. I don't, why would we do that?
No, just one sidewalk, but it would be
It would be a
wider and-
10-foot sidewalk to accommodate the
Oh.
trail and the sidewalk. Does that make sense? Instead
that
of a
makes
standard
sense, but just-
6-foot sidewalk.
It's kind
To
of-
combine, because we'd require a 10-foot asphalted trail according to our general plan on the back end of the property. So we said a good alternative would be add additional 4 feet to the front and of concrete and make a larger
Where does the trail, where will it go?
along Gulfport Road across
Just on the north side of Old Fort Road and
and
then
then up
follow
through the
the
property.
road,
Yeah, according to our.
10 feet
actually
all the way
chapter.
down, that entire segment then?
It would match up with the 10-foot asphalt trail eventually where they would
Where it might
split,
diverge.
right?
In the woods?
Into the woods?
Yeah. Out of the woods and.
I don't know that I
Yeah.
love that idea. I think that's kind of weird, but I understand the reasoning for it and I understand the solution to it, but a 10-foot path, sidewalk seems a little overkill.
Seems really wide.
We could have like stroller wars on it, like people race these strollers.
There's currently a 10-foot wide trail on between the road and I-84 in the Cottonwood Cove subdivision. So it would just be an
Paved?
extension of that. It is paved, yes,
It is paved, yeah.
it's asphalt.
A good reference is in Salt Lake City, the sidewalks are typically 10 feet, right, between the building and the road. So
Huh.
10-foot sidewalk. If you, for reference point, obviously it wouldn't be Salt Lake City, I'm just saying for width wise.
Well, this dice is 16 feet, so.
So for me to Blair, that is a,
Keep in mind, it's to accommodate
probably what they
bicycle
said,
traffic and things like that.
Okay, but hold on, because when we did Old Fort Road, we designed it so there would be a bike lane
right.
in Old Fort Road.
I mean, that makes it really wide.
We can choose to waive that requirement from the general plan if we want to. It's just
We'll
part of the
take that
general
too.
plan act.
All right, Brian, what do you got? What do you want to say?
It's just part of the overall trail system, so that was.
I mean, it makes sense to me if it's in the back of, in the south side of the property. If we put the trail back there and make it 10 feet. I understand that, but I also understand that it wouldn't make sense to put that trail in that property for this particular use, so we move it back to the south side of the property. But then it's just right next, it's just an extra wide sidewalk. It's not a trail, it's a big sidewalk.
It is a big sidewalk, that's true.
Well, but at the same time, I think that, well, while I'm excited to have the prospect of general RV, at the same time, you know, we've got these things in the general plan. We've got them that we've already gone through and we've, you know, made some considerations for. I don't want to give you guys a false impression that it's like, oh yeah, let's just erase all of these things and give it, because I do think that there needs to be some consideration to this. While I do want to give, you know, the impression that yes, you know, we are interested in this, but at the same time, I don't want to destroy all the work that we've worked hard to get to this point at. So just my 2 cents.
And that's absolutely fair, Joel. I appreciate that perspective. I just, looking at 10 feet as in practicality, how, you know, how that turns out now with
Yeah.
this project, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
I
what
see
you're
where you're
getting at is project approval conversation,
Mhm.
right? The details of site plan and things like that, that will go through the approval process. And knowing that the request is concurrent with that, but the timeline of establishing it with the other entities and whatnot, I think you will know what the project elements would be prior to the finalization of the incentive agreement.
Agreed.
Right, and I'm just saying that we do want to keep track of that, because obviously what we're talking about is we're, you know, requiring these costs of the development itself. We're going to end up reimbursing or paying for those costs. So of course, it makes more sense for us to reduce the, you know, amount that we're charging ourselves, if you will, basically. But at the same time, I do think there was reason. Yeah, you know, so.
And I mean,
I think-
obviously you will go through the site plan in detail. With regards to the firewall, it was actually built in specifically in the code that the city council could address it and determine whether it was reasonable for the project. And in this particular instance, I actually think there are some pretty valid reasons for not putting in that wall. There is a pretty big buffer there, the canal in the way, and if it's a firewall, you seem to have some protection there already. So it does seem like it could be a reasonable conclusion that the city council comes to.
Right. And at the same time, though, I'm not familiar enough with the firewall, whether that's to prevent wildfires coming in or fires from, you know, a shop here, going out into the neighborhoods and stuff. So again, I just want to be able to look at it and really, you know, kind of make a appropriate decision.
Can I just add that the term firewall
Please,
is
yeah.
making this sound like much more than it is. It's just a masonry fence.
So it's not a border wall, you know, with the big line.
It could be like the one that Riverside RV has just across the freeway, or down the freeway a little bit farther to the east. It's just a different material type, but the look is similar. That's what you're talking about. So I think the reason that fire has come in is because it has, in the code, it talks about safety and potentially protecting against wildfire and things like that, but it's just a masonry fence. It's the same thing that, right.
It's not a wall with a foundation. It's basically, I mean, I hate to use brand names, but it's a rhino rock wall and we put it in the code after we had the fire, and literally it hit that rhino rock wall, and when we had the fire, and it didn't go past, and it protected the property, and it wasn't it's a $76 lineal foot fence. So, I mean, if it were my property, it would be great to put on it. But, I mean, we can either waive it or go to that type of wall. I don't care.
So what I'm hearing is, to answer your question, the city does have an appetite to negotiate on these items.
Okay, that's great news.
Thank you.
So can I just add a couple other questions? So you make the statement largely due to the high cost of developing and operating. Is it just the items you've listed there? There's
Yeah.
other high cost.
Yeah, and I think the reason I say high cost in the city is most cities have an RDA in place. And so they kind of already structured and set up for this kind of development. And so they can offset the infrastructure costs pretty easily. But because this city doesn't have an RDA established yet, it makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out how to pay for that infrastructure from the outset.
And then my second comment is, if the 1.1 million goes away, then is your ask going to be different?
I don't necessarily think so. I think we still would like to go through the process. It could make it a little bit simpler. Maybe there are other negotiation tools we could use with the city to pay for those infrastructure costs and the impact fees that are on the property. So, I mean, maybe if that cost does go away, we're talking about a much smaller figure that we could all manage a little bit easier. But I think the process would.
So you're not saying 1.5, if we get rid of the fence, we're still going to go with 1.5 and use it on. Okay,
No.
so it's,
No,
okay.
no.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we know the impact fee amount?
We have some estimates, yeah. Would you share that, Brendan? I know you had, instead of sharing that with the developer directly, let's make it a public conversation.
Kevin's been waiting for a long time. So,
Specifically asked Brendan to have that ready in case that question came tonight, so.
yes. So
It was a priority.
it's estimated because, final exact, hard, or the square footage of hard surfacing and things like that could change a little bit. But the total was 413,182. And of that, 263,750 was just for storm drain, because there's so much hard surfacing. That's just the rates and the square footages, straight calculation based on if they were to come in today and we were just to assess their impact fee calculation, that's what it would be.
Brandon, could you give me that number again?
You bet. The total was 413,182.
So is a large portion of that due to the Old Fort Road too? I know the 230 is, but is the rest of that, a lot of that impact from what we did on Old Fort Road?
No, there's nothing that's really associated with that. I'll just quickly tell you the impact fees that we have in place are parks and trails, and that doesn't apply to them because non-residential is zero. Public safety fire station, that applies to them. It's a rate of 19 cents per square foot. Recreational building also does not apply. Residential is zero. Water is based on the meter size. They have a 4-inch meter. That's 13,220. The city's portion of the sewer is also based on the meter size of the water meter. That's 29,338. Then transportation might have been what you were thinking about. That's just based on a trip analysis, which was already provided through the traffic impact study that was done. And so those trip rates were already calculated. And based on that comes to 39,402. The Weber Basin element is the part that actually purchases the water that we need. And that's also based on the meter size. That's 43,630. Central Weber Sewer does their own. We collect it on their behalf, but the actual calculation they do on their own. So I do not have that one. And then the last was the storm sewer, and that was the 263,750. That's maybe more detail than you asked for, but
No,
there you go.
No, that's really
One of the
good.
reasons I was asking that is like, because I was thinking of Central Weaver and is that something else that we have to put together and ask of those to waive?
But yeah, potentially, if that's part of the ask, then we would have to calculate what that is and then work with Central Weaver.
I think of all of those 3 bullet points, obviously the property tax over time is the biggest number. Annually, it's maybe not as big as the impact fees we're talking about, but as a one-time number, the impact fees is the largest number.
And I'm assuming that's fluid enough so that every year as our legislator or county raises the taxes, it's not just a set fee that we do at the beginning, right? It's something that we go on, continue on.
The impact fee is
No, for the taxes.
established through the
Taxes.
taxes in general.
Yeah.
Yes, that's just based on the rates that we go through.
Yeah, so the way that would work, Joel, is the agreement the RDA would make with the developer would be to waive the city's portion. And then the agreement that the other taxing entities would make with the city would be to waive whatever it is they would assess in property taxes over the duration of that period. So if the ask is 10 years, if they adjust the rate within that 10-year period, it would still be the same ratio that would be waived or.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, just to clarify a small point that was made earlier, I think the abatement is one issue and that's how that would work. I think if it was an infrastructure cost and it was reimbursed to us, I think the hope would be that it would also be calculated based on sales tax. So until that infrastructure cost was paid off. So it wouldn't just be the property tax increment, the TIF instrument for the property tax, but we would also take from the sales tax until the infrastructure costs are paid.
Yes.
So wait a minute. Now you're saying for 10 years, we're not getting anything.
No, I'm looking at
Utilize future sales tax to offset this cost.
Okay.
So Joel and Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what she just said is there are 2 ways you could do that with the infrastructure costs. You could bond for it and reimburse them up front when they put it in, or you could not bond for it and you would reimburse it over time as a rate, and that overtime reimbursement would come from the sales tax revenues generated by the site.
Thank you.
Now, you'd establish an amount, right, that
Mhm.
you'd reimburse up to. And so
Right.
if you hit that in 4 years, great. If you hit that in 6 years or whatever.
It would be a set figure, it would be the infrastructure cost.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and those agreements would, you would put conditions in the agreement, so it would require them to construct and open their business within a certain amount of time, and then if there are other markers that you need to put in there, you would put them in, and then as long as they adhere to those requirements, then they'd qualify to be reimbursed at intervals.
Okay.
Usually they're annual intervals, but you could, in theory, you could do it more or less frequently than that.
Thank you. That's to Quinn's earlier question about, if something changes in 5, 10 years, right, you'd have that in the performance idea. In the
Right,
agreement.
so if they don't open and there's no sales tax, they're not gonna get that reimbursed because there's no sales tax.
So the bond option is actually betting on future.
Yeah, so you're essentially pledging
Right.
the taxes. Expected.
That's, I think, part of why I said what I did earlier, that we'd prefer to not do it that way, although they're both methods that end up accomplishing.
And I agree with David, a project of this size, I think a reimbursement agreement is a simpler vehicle than bonding.
I have one more question for you. Okay, so the 10-year term, I would hope to see some negotiation on that length of time. Is that something that your client would be amicable to?
I haven't discussed that with them specifically. I think once we dig into the figures, we can figure out what makes the most sense.
So maybe you could see if there's an appetite for consideration for that. Okay, thank you.
I will talk to the client.
Okay, thank you. This is fun. You should come back again.
This is a good council.
I've seen in other RDA examples in my past, even with property tax, an amount established, right? And so if there's additional property tax that's generated over time, you pay it off faster or whatnot. Or I've seen it as has been proposed, a specific time frame. So, yeah, there are options there. I think that it's just a matter of discussing.
Okay.
If you're open to that.
Yeah, I think the formula, I think we'd be open to changing the formula potentially.
So our consensus is that we're willing to work with them on these incentives, is that?
Does anybody have any major concerns other than, the details? With the RDA in general, is kind of my
No.
question.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, then we'll just keep heading down that path and yeah, you seem to have a great city, and so we'll keep working with the city and we'll probably see you again.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw Jeremy walk in somewhere. Jeremy, you're up. Planning Commission goals.
Thanks for letting me come in today. Jeremy Davis, 2137 East, 8100 South. Over the past few months, I've been talking with the mayor, with Trevor, about how can we, as a planning commission, be more proactive in what we do instead of being reactive on everything that we do. And that's something I'm very passionate about in my job, and I was hoping to translate some of that to the planning commission. And what came of that was the thought of, is it possible for us to bring to you some items that we feel like would be a good idea for us to focus on in 2023 and kind of have goals, I guess you could say. So we discussed that during the last commission meeting, and we agreed that there were two kind of main topics that we would love your support on as for us to kind of move forward with, and that is water use in the city and I just lost land use and looking at all the land use code and just diving into those two topics to see if there's something that we can do proactively to strengthen the code, to adjust the code, however we think we could make a positive impact for the city, obviously with your direction. So that was what I wanted to kind of present to you this evening, is the idea of us being a little more proactive on the planning commission side
And then getting good partnership, obviously, from you, the city council, to initiate that proactive measure. And I think what this would end up doing is maybe even if you look at the code committee, maybe those goals would end up becoming the main talking points during code committee of, okay, we're going to focus on these two things because these two things are really important to the city, if you all agree. And then maybe that helps the code committee move through things a little faster, or maybe it helps direct those conversations. I haven't been part of code committee yet, so I don't know how those go exactly, but I understand that sometimes those conversations can get really long, and maybe you don't feel like you're getting enough out of those meetings as maybe you were hoping to get out. So hopefully if we go in with some really good direction and we are united in what we want to accomplish, then that can help direct some of those conversations to be a little more fluent, and then we can see some progress a little more quickly. So that's what I had. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you want to expand on the goal with the integration of water? Like, what would you hope to accomplish there, or what do you want to look at?
So we didn't get into a lot of details when we were discussing it. We were doing more general ideas of, hey, I think it's important for us to look at these general topics and kind of dive into the details there. But all of us were pretty united on that one, that we still need to be very drought conscious in our code. And right now, I think there's an opportunity to look at that a little better and to see if there are opportunities to change how we look at water usage in the city, whether it's through what we require from developers as far as what we want them to plant in new developments, or I don't know, I guess you could look at other things like oh my gosh, sorry, the water meters for the secondary and whatnot, to make sure that we have accountability from the residents from that perspective. So I think there's a lot of topics that we could dive into. And I think if we agree on the general topic, then we can start diving into those general topics and start coming up with a list of things that would fall under those topics to kind of dive in and address.
Okay. So just so you know, we did talk about what was water this?
Yeah.
Was that this year?
Yep.
Good gravy.
And it's fun. The portion that we worked on, yeah.
So we that was culinary water rates that we looked into, and that was more of, basically we created a plan if the drought continued and it started to get like very yeah, I mean, as I already was, but like as far as culinary rates, South Weaver does really great. We're well below our usage, mostly because we're almost entirely secondary. But we did create basically the best way to get people to conserve their water is to make them pay more for it. So the more you use, the higher your rates would go. But if we got to that state where basically the mayor, remind me if I'm remembering this right, but the mayor has the ability to declare a state of emergency,
Yeah.
something like that.
State of water
Where
emergency.
for the city, where water specific, where these increased rates would go into place.
Sure.
Just to help conserve on that front. So that was something that we finished up this summer. And then the metering of secondary is actually state law at this point. So they kind of, well, they took the reins from us again on that one. But so, and then, but we did talk about landscaping is on our list, I believe.
It's on the list. And one of the things that we need to do is really kind of look a little bit more detail into, and I'm sure this is what you guys are thinking of, what's the most appropriate. Brandon's already left, or Brandon. Oh, okay.
They'll be back.
We're even talking about the city standards changing to the different types of seeds. And we know now that the Utah State University has a drought tolerant seed that you can use that is incredible and actually works better, and using that as a standard for a lot of the commercial developments and making it available for the residential. Yeah, there's a lot of things. It would be good to have a little bit of y'all's feedback on what you're looking specifically for, ideas. But yeah, I think we've gone down that road already quite a bit. So I think that would be one that would be easy for us to jump into. There are a couple other priorities also. So we wouldn't be able to just take, like you said, the water and land use only. But they could definitely be a high priority, highest, I'd say.
Yeah, there's a saying, if I may, from my businesses, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority.
Exactly.
So, I think it's hugely important to say, okay, how do we prioritize this list of things that we need to focus on? And then let's tackle them, down the list. So, yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because we've been trying to, since code committee was created, really try and figure out what the role of the committee is. And I'd love to hear my council members' opinions on it as well. But it's, I think the intention of the code committee initially, and maybe continuing on, is because some of these are difficult topics and you have to get into the weeds in order to know what to do with it.
Yep.
And it will make for very long planning commission meetings. So code committee was kind of created as a buffer to be able to go into that with less hands in the pot maybe. And I don't even know if that counts some of the time because there's more of us, but there are a lot of items that we feel the planning commission could just take, and maybe it might be a meeting or two that you guys could just take, and it just goes through the regular process and bypasses code committee altogether. So that we're able to take the ones that are going to be a little bit more complex, a little bit more complicated, but the ones that aren't going to bog you guys down with 5-hour meetings would be something that you could do in a meeting or two to get moving forward. So you talked about here developing on a hillside, which is something that we have talked about in code committee, but it's not on our priority list. So that would be like a perfect example if this council feels something. I feel like the planning commission could delve into that and not have it be a 8-hour meeting, you know, necessarily, but it's something that would give us the ability to move forward. So basically, I think finding a balance between not bogging down code committee and not bogging down our planning commission, like we're able to kind of bounce things back and forth.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the priority list, right?
Mhm.
So if we are all aware. I'm not sick, I promise. I just got the if we're all aware of what that priority is, then I think it's a matter of looking at that list, because I haven't seen the priority list, so maybe I need to talk to somebody.
There is one. I thought Trevor had given it to the planning commission. So we did create one at the beginning of the year, and I believe we're doing it again. Priority
We're at
list
least going to review it,
for
right?
retreat. The retreat, we created it and we're going to review it. So we'll be
I think that's important.
revisiting.
Yeah, I think we should know what that is.
Yeah.
And to your point, if there are things on there that are low hanging fruit that we could tackle, and you don't require us to go through the
Yeah.
code committee to tackle it, then I think
Well, I
that's
feel like we
fine.
bumped 3 or 4 items straight to planning commission just a couple meetings ago. So, perhaps I'm getting the reality that perhaps the communication between the two of us is not as on top as it needs to be. So we need to improve on that.
Yeah, that would be great.
So, but I appreciate you bringing this up, because that's exactly what we were thinking is, what is the appetite of the planning commission to take more of the load from the code committee? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on again, I think we have to look at the priorities. I don't think it's complicated. I think we just need to, well, it's not even that we agree. It's just, you need to tell us what's important, and then we can take a look at the list, and then we can come to you and be like, hey, we think we can tackle these things in this amount of time. And then just work with Trevor on the nitty-gritty details that maybe we are not aware of. And then we can come and we can, like, 'cause I'm all about being proactive. So if the things that are on my list are already on your list, that's awesome. And we're already kind of aligned, which is awesome. But I would love to be able to get through it a lot faster, because I didn't feel like we made a lot of progress last year on the code, but I feel like there's just an opportunity to get through a lot more things. So if the solution or answer to that is, let's start with a priority list, and then let's partner to figure out what we can handle on our own, and what needs a lot more discussion because it's either super sensitive topic or it's really complicated and it's just going to take time to get through it. I'm totally okay with that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
So I don't think my fellow commissioners want to have 5-hour meetings either. So
Well, you
but
guys,
if it's necessary.
one thing that I'd recommend, and boy, I hate even saying the word more than you know. There's a business philosophy and a production philosophy called agile.
I was a scrum master.
There you go. So that's what we're kind of looking for is we're not asking for you guys to write the code. We've got the meeting that's going to have the lawyer in it. We've got that kind of experience. We've got Trevor all there. But at the same time, we could use cases, if you will, because the water usage is pretty simple. You know, you guys could go through real quickly and just say, these are the key points that we're looking for, and then give the meat into it, and then just a quick question and answer back and forth, and we should be able to write the code for it. Land use, though, now that one I think is one that, in my opinion, you should take back to the planning commission and say, okay, what do we want on this? Because that's a huge.
It is.
But if you knew, okay, well, these are the cases that we're looking at fixing. These are the profiles that we need to create. You don't have to get into the detail of it, but you just have to be able to say, okay, we want to re-look at the industrial zone. This is what we've got. This is what we need to do. These are the conditional uses. This is that kind of stuff. Everything's great on that. The only part that we have a problem with is this, or maybe that whole thing just needs to be looked at or something. Because if it can just go quick like that, then I think it's easier for us to be able to make a prioritization based on knowledge of things that are coming down the pipe.
Gotcha. Well,
So-
what I'm hearing from you, if I may,
Yeah.
is you already have a priority list, and that may be adjusted after your retreat, which is great. But at the same time, what you would like to see from the planning commission is something that either ties into that, if we know what that is, or if we provide a little more details, then you can add those specific topics into the priority list. Is that-
Exactly. So all I'm saying is land use is a big one.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a lot. Break that down into, here's the components that we're actually talking about so that it can be prioritized. That would help us tremendously.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do you guys meet this week?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Well, if I may, if you want to let your planning commissioners know, if the mayor is okay with this, I would love to hear what you guys feel is important for us to discuss. You guys are the gatekeepers, really.
Sure.
So we have our retreat later this month, but if you guys are meeting this week, if you wouldn't mind just letting them know to think about things that they think should be a priority, I would love to take it back to the council and let them know.
Yeah, well, it's just funny that we're going down this road, because we were thinking if we got into too much detail, then you wouldn't want it. So we were trying to keep it high level in our last meeting. So thank you for the feedback. We'll definitely dive in and try to highlight some things that we think are definitely broken or
Yeah.
need to be looked at. So that, and hopefully we can get that to you in that meeting, so you can take that
Yeah.
to the retreat. Yeah.
And then maybe what we can do is where we have planning commission members that are part of the code committee, and their intention was to go back and report to the planning commission, but there's hit and miss and schedules issues and things, and I totally understand. So maybe what we could do better on is actually giving you guys a recap of the code committee discussions, especially that pertain to planning commission,
Yeah.
land use, so that you guys are aware of what we're doing in there and why we are where we are at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would
Yeah,
improve
there's definitely a
communication.
communication gap
Mhm.
there, because
Definitely a communication
Yeah.
gap. Yeah.
so yeah, if we can address that, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
That'd be a great, easy first step.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds
Thank you.
great. Okay. Thank you so much for coming.
Yep.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Jeremy.
Thank
That's
you,
so
Jeremy.
nice.
Good.
Yes,
Yeah, we appreciate that.
productivity is the way to go.
Okay, our next item is action items. So approval of the consent agenda, which consists of November 29th minutes, December 13th minutes, December's checks, and November's budget to actual. Is there any discussion on these action items? If not, then I'll look for a motion to approve that.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Seconded.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next item, ordinance 2023-01, city standards. Every so many years, we have to redo these city standards, and it's time for that to be take place at this time. We've received the packet on that and read that. Does anybody have any discussion that they wanted to talk about on the standards?
It seemed really boring, and I'm glad we have people we pay for it.
You're welcome.
Well done.
Okay, then,
I do have one question.
okay,
Brendan, on the Appendix D, South Weaver Public Works Standards drawing, down on, I think it was G1? Yeah, G1, updated the fence post table depth. I mean, is that the granular level we're getting in with the standards? Is that what we have as the
Yes.
depth even of all of it? So, was there anything in here that is looking at, and I think I found one, I just don't see where I wrote it down on here, that is affecting the storm drain? Because I thought that there was something that either on this appendix or on the standards above modified storm drain to a higher pipe to meet a state level. Is that,
Are you thinking of the 80th percentile storm versus the 90th percentile storm?
No, I see that. I see that one was state
What
mandated,
page
right?
Are you on, Joe?
150. So on 150, Appendix A, Storm Drain and Drainage Design Standards. So we're supposed to now use the requirements of the 80 percentile instead of 90. Is that going to change our storm drain costs that we just put through last year? Won't have
No.
any difference on it.
The 80th percentile was already figured into that. But that's really,
Okay.
this is talking about water quality, not really water quantity.
But no additional cost.
No.
Okay, that makes me extremely happy. That was it.
okay, well, I'll look for a motion then.
Mayor,
Yes,
sorry,
Dave?
one thing about it is in the streetlight section, after we got Black and McDonald involved, they informed us of a minor change from, 2-inch to 1.5 inch. And so the document shows 2-inch and it needs to be 1.5. So in whoever's
Do you
motion,
need to amend it?
if you're willing to put that in.
1.5 inch on what?
Brandon, would you
It's-
take that away?
Street.
What was your question, Quinn?
1.5.
2-inch change to 1.5 inch on what?
Street light.
The conduit for the electrical cable that services the streetlights.
Have fun with that, Quinn.
Hey.
You could just say as recommended.
That makes it so much
Hey,
easier.
Brandon, you ruined my fun.
All right, if there's no further discussion, Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 2023-01 with the following amendment. As recommended, change the conduit size from 2-inch to 1.5 inch
I second that.
Hold on.
for the streetlight.
Street
Okay, we'll
light.
have a roll call vote starting Councilman Howerson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion approved. Thank you. Next item, resolution 23-01, appointment of the 2023 mayor pro temp. Council appointed this last year, and so I'm looking to have them do that again this year. Would someone like to make?
Did we really?
Yes.
Yeah.
We did.
Who was it?
Last year was
Later.
Wow.
Didn't even have to use it.
I would like to nominate Quinn. Not only would he be excellent at the job, I just think it's time for him to serve up.
Step up.
Haley didn't know we had anybody. Maybe
Clearly,
she ought to be.
Haley is not professional enough for that calling assignment, whatever. Yeah, I don't even know the words. I agree with Joel.
I agree with Joel too.
second
And a third.
Seconded.
and a third and
And of course.
and all in favor.
Aye.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Oh, do we need to make a resolution
Do we have
specifically?
a?
Yeah, you need to,
We
do it
need-
by- I hate to say this, you need to do it by roll.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
I move to approve resolution 23-01, appoint council member Quinn Soderquist as 2023 mayor pro tempore.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll begin with a roll call vote. Councilman Dale.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
That was your chance to back out.
I'll do my time.
Item number 12, resolution 23-02, appointment of new planning commissioner. Commissioner Taylor is going off this month, so it's necessary that we appoint a new commissioner. We've had several applications, and we appreciate all those that applied for this. All were qualified to do this. We limited that down to one individual, and he has said that he will do that. So I would like to present to the council tonight Chad Scola to fill that position. Chad, would you like to come up? And anyone that the council that would like to ask Chad a question?
Well, we broke you in really well because it's 8 o'clock and you're just barely getting to it, so.
Just go ahead. I was gonna say the same thing. We're breaking you in here tonight. 2 hours, get used to it.
You do keep an entertaining meeting, so.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah, Chad Scola, I'm at 786 South, 2100 East. Excited for the opportunity.
You want to introduce yourself a little bit or tell us a little bit about yourself?
A little bit about me. Yeah, married with, we're a blended family. We've got 2 kids, 2 12-year-olds at home. 2 older that are out of the house and around. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Extreme Auto Group down in Centerville. So we do a little of everything. I've been in South Weber since 2018. I'm from Davis County, so I grew up in Bountiful. Spent 13 years in the Army and kind of all over California, DC, Africa, the biggest, longest stints that I've been. And I always end up back in Utah and found South Weber and immediately fell in love. I lived in Bountiful, but yeah, I don't think I knew South Weber was here for the majority of my life until I started looking at houses and said, well, where's South Weber at? And here it is. And then I saw a house and it stuck. So yeah, a little bit about me.
Thank you. We're glad you're here.
Yeah,
So,
very glad
Can
you're
I
here.
ask one question?
Yes.
What is it that you love about South Weber? What is it that made you want to be on the PC, on the planning commission?
I've lived in several really big cities and I hate them. I didn't know I hated them. I actually was on the waiting list to move to City Creek when they first started building apartments because I wanted to do the big city thing, right? And then I joined the Army and I end up in Washington, DC was my first big taste of city, right? And then I was in Orange County, California for my last 3 years in the Army, and I immediately decided that I hate that. And then come back here, South Davis County is just exploded, and I hate even driving over the bridge across Paris just to get anywhere. So I spent a lot of time at Maverick. It's great down there. This one's great too, and so yeah, I moved here and it has as small a city feel as I can handle for the drive that I need to go. I mean, obviously I could go further away and get smaller, but I view it as like a hidden gem. Like it's small, quiet. I can mention it to people that live in Utah and they don't even know where I'm talking about. They assume I'm in Weber County. So it's, and just, preserving that and keeping it the way it is. I'm fairly passionate about that.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, keeping it hidden is kind of what we're going for. We don't
Yes,
want anyone to know about it.
We're struggling with that.
Yeah, it's getting a little harder.
Yeah.
Oh, you want a question?
Oh, yeah, and she always has a question. Be prepared.
I'm on the spot. Okay, would you rather
Oh,
only see everything in the color blue or never be able to learn how to read?
well,
We played this game on every road trip.
Right?
It gets rather entertaining. I'd rather see, if I can either see it blue or I can read,
You
I
can,
can't read.
or I can't read.
yeah, so,
If I see blue, I can read.
yeah,
Yeah, then I'd rather see blue.
see blue.
Yeah.
That's good,
Sure.
because you're gonna need to read to have this
Yeah,
position, so.
reading is important.
Otherwise, I'd have to say you
Yeah, that
gotta
would-
go back and pick
Yeah,
somebody else.
Can't do without reading.
Yeah, kind of important. Well, we're excited to have you. Thank you
Yeah.
for choosing to serve.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, I need a motion.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve resolution 23-02 to appoint Chad Scola as the new planning commissioner.
I'll
I'll
second that. I get it.
We'll start with the roll call vote with Councilman Halverson.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi. Sorry.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chad. Thank you.
Congratulations. And we'll
Are you swearing in?
Oh,
do the
Okay.
swearing in tonight.
Come on up.
come right here. Come stand here. There you go.
That's good. enough.
Now everybody can see you. Her.
Lisa.
Raise your hand. State your name.
I, Chad Solon,
Do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend
obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Very good.
Okay. Next item, resolution 23-03, final plat with phasing for Peterson Farm PUD at approximately 6950 south, 475 east. Applicant Tim Grubb, would you like to come up?
You've been waiting a long time.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you want me to introduce anything or just want to be up here to.
Just if there's any questions anyone has, I think everyone's pretty familiar with.
Is there anything that's changed or that we need to be aware of that we may not have noticed?
Yeah, it's all apartments.
Denied. Denied.
Yeah, I don't know what's, discussions you guys have had or what Trevor's brought up, but it's been a good process going through. We've made a lot of changes on our end, just trying to figure out what would work best for the property. I don't know why I get emotional, but I live on this property. So there's 20 lots and 2 of the lots have homes on them. One of them is mine and the other one's my son. And so definitely this development holds close to my heart. We're excited to see growth because we love people. We're sad to see change because we love our past and our history and our relatives. There's been some beautiful things that have happened on this property just in the short time that I've lived there, since moved in back in '95, and just irrigating and enjoying the peace of the farm is something that's very special. But of course, I'm not a farmer, and we get older, and the people that are farming it for us are getting older, and they've had hip replacements, and it's all we can do to get somebody to help us to do the farm. And we have children, we have grandkids and people that would like to build and like to see a benefit to this in a different way than how it's been used in the past. Definitely, hard to see the change. It was a tough day to watch the barn get torn down. But my wife and I, we love pickleball. We really do. And it is so fun. We often have gone over there many times and just conversed with the people without even having to play. We just enjoy that element. We had the opportunity to build an assisted care center. That's not agricultural, but provides housing for some beautiful residents, people that are in their last season of their life. And it's been an honor to go over there and serve, to feed people, a meal, get to know some people. It's been a great thing. This subdivision has a few different elements. The majority is single-family homes. And we do have one lot that will have 6 units for rental purposes. I hope to have a design, worked on some things and submitted some things to the city as far as that goes, so that it fits the neighborhood. Initially looking at with some architects and design. Typically, they throw a building in front of you and put some carports in front of it and say, hey, this would be the most efficient use. And I had that when I designed the assisted living center, and I didn't like what the architects did, and went back to the drawing board and tried to create something that was more of a single family look. And same idea with these, the 6 units. I'm hoping to do something that looks more like a couple of single family dwellings. I mean, they're going to have more garages than normal, but rather than carports, we'd rather have people be able to park inside, have building materials that are more appropriate for the design that we like in our neighborhood, that matches my home, matches the care center, matches the home that I just designed next door for my son. And so it's just an opportunity to give back to the city. I don't think you have to earn a right to live in the city. I think the city's open to everyone. And so I love the opportunity to provide a place for both homes that maybe it's their last destination. It's the last home to enjoy grandkids and whatnot, or these rental units could be an opportunity for young, like my kids, looking for a place to live. And new program where I need to stop eating and drinking at night so that I can sleep better. But, so I won't be eating and drinking anymore.
8 o'clock. We know what time Tim gets the alarm now.
Don't give me any food or water now. So I like the ability with this subdivision to allow young, to a few residents could possibly live on this development and be a part of our community. It doesn't have to be all just large retirement homes. It can be a mix, and I love the mix. I just absolutely love the mix. We've had a lot of interest with people that have family at the care center, and they would love, someplace to rent and live. So there's just a lot of places, this subdivision, I feel like it touches on. It's a nice sweet spot for providing those needs for long-term and short-term residents. I don't know that I have anything else, but I just appreciate the opportunity and developing this property. We had the opportunity with our zoning to do a lot more units on this property. That's not what I'm about. I'm just about trying to make it nice. Just work with people. So, and be just a pleasant place. I don't know if you have any other questions specifically on this.
I've got a number of questions for Trevor on the process that we've done here with. Number one, so this has gone through the planning commission. It is now up to us for a final, and it's a final on the plat, correct?
Yes, it's a final on the plat and also the accompanying agreements with it.
Okay. Can you tell me what is being requested that is against code?
So this subdivision is a PUD, planned unit development. The PUD allows the developer to utilize their lot lines and different configurations of lots on the property. So what is different from the regular code in the zoning is this requested setbacks. So in each lot, there's different requested setbacks. There's a table that indicates what those setbacks are for each lot. I mean, not every lot has its own setbacks, but there's a group of lots that have a certain setback and a group of lots have a different setback. So that's the biggest ask is those the departure from those setback requirements that are found in the other code.
And what was the reasoning for the setbacks?
Just so we could do zero lot lines, do combine the units like you might have the townhomes across the street here. You have to do it under a PUD so that you cannot have your typical subdivision setback.
So just a little more context, I believe I spoke of it in the memo. This property is subject to a previous agreement about 20 years ago. Is that correct, Brandon? Give or take? Maybe longer than that.
2000.
Yeah. I think it was early 2000s, late 90s. But in that agreement, the city agreed that the future development of the site can include the open space within the park and the hillside in the calculations for density on the property. Does that make sense? So in the PUD, it allows for clustering that development and utilizing open space. And so by giving that portion of the park to the city's utilizing that open space as the park, and they're clustering their development down.
And that's the only thing that's going against code.
Yes.
I don't know if I like the word against.
I don't know.
It's available within the PUD.
Yeah. I would say departure
So
from
we just have to
typical
ask
zone.
for that.
Is there anything else that's being asked for that goes against code?
So, so our PUD ordinance is a conditional use, right? And so, and as a residential conditional use, that's housed by the planning commission to review those requirements and set any requirements for the setbacks or things like that. And so it is a departure from our traditional zoning code, but it is a approved conditional use in the planned unit development.
Okay, so down on the bottom end, that's an apartment. That's not part of the PUD. That's going to be a whole separate.
No, it's part of it.
It is part of it also.
Entire
It's in the second
subdivision of the PUD.
Okay, because it's okay. The driveway going into your sixplex, that's goes along with our current code.
It wouldn't be a sixplex, there'd be a fourplex and a duplex.
Okay,
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons why it's a rental unit, is because in order for those to be townhomes, they had to have a private road. They weren't able to with our constraints on our road. And so they created a shared parking lot, essentially, right? A shared driveway into a set of rental units under one ownership. So.
and that's what you were saying with the garages. Those are built into it, so people just drive right into it. There's no parking on the outside.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I've
you know,
seen.
Typical.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought that was the plans were in the packet.
They were with our architectural review, but
Okay.
since this is
Which we'd still like to
Subdivision
see the architectural review and all the paperwork that's come forward. So I'm still not a fan of that. I mean, obviously it's not something that we can deal with since it's apparently part of our code, but yeah, I think that's really restricting, especially where it's just going down and it's one driveway for 6 units. I believe you mentioned you were thinking that this might be some of the people from the Peterson's assisted living that would be renting there.
That's definitely potential. There'd been an interest with that.
Okay.
I mean, it just provides another spot for people,
Yeah.
you know, that are looking for something different than a.
Yeah, but it's
Single
those
family.
same people that I always feel the fiduciary duty to make sure that they really get the best.
So yeah, this has to meet fire code as
Mhm.
far as turnaround and all that, just like any
Yeah.
of your other developments.
I just had a question on the fencing. I read it like 14 times. I think I just couldn't. So what are we doing with this development agreement on the fence, on the boundary line?
So the boundary line agreement?
Yeah, sorry, that one.
The boundary line agreement is just that historically there's been kind of a gap or an overlap along the line between the city's park and this property. The boundary line agreement essentially is saying that we both agree, the two property owners, the city and Peterson, that the fence, the currently installed fence is the property line.
Okay. So we have two parcels, the 0049 and then the 0075. So those will still stay with the city. The 0075 is the one that's kind of like on the left there, that kind of.
Right, this small triangle.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so why do we have just two different parcel numbers? Just because of the history there, or is that a new parcel number?
Those are just those are the adjacent parcel numbers to the line that we're agreeing upon.
Okay, so the red line is where the new boundary line is going.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was that little jog or not.
No.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
I think the only question I have is follow along with what Joe was saying as far as the setback. Maybe the way to explain it is, you know, it's typically a 20-foot setback. You have a 10-foot that you're requesting. The reason we ask for a 20-foot setback, what are we giving up there? Nothing.
It's just buffer from homes. That's typically what setbacks are for, or allow for public utility easements or things like that. Just provide that buffer from the edge of the yard, fire, code restrictions and things like that. So that's kind of the gist of that.
Right, there's not necessarily a big safety issue or any other.
Not necessarily. There's a lot of buffer between the yards, and typically a 10-foot setback is okay on
adequate,
standard, right, for safety reasons.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like the PU.
Zero lot
Right,
lines,
yeah.
so.
The PUD just allows a little bit more flexibility, and in exchange for that flexibility, they have additional requirements on them as well. So it kind of just takes the strictness of the code and gives you a little bit of flexibility within the development.
So my question would just be, as far as like the landscaping fee in lieu of, detention basin fee in lieu of, just the reason you're requesting that is just simplicity's sake, right? Pay it. You don't have to deal with it and the city takes responsibility, right? Or is this in part of it's already been done?
I would love to not.
It's
So there,
that's detention basin and all that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm
Well,
fine here, because I
sorry.
was looking at it like,
Can I
Yeah.
ask additionally? So I get the storm drain. I was confused about the landscaping.
so in our code for the R7 zone, we require landscaping for that zone, 15% of the total site.
Uh-huh.
So how we calculated what they would be responsible for is 15% of the total R7 zone included in the project. We took what that would be, and that would be the amount of landscaping that they'd be required to do. As we were looking at the site, they wouldn't be able to meet that on the site, but that's typically because that landscaping would go in the open space, which they had already dedicated to the city.
Gotcha.
And so we had discussed potentially having an agreement that they would pay into the landscaping for our
park.
city park.
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Which, I mean, we would love to, you know, waive that, being that we donated that property and it's a beautiful feature for the cities.
But you would also love to have a really nice landscape park right behind your house too, right?
Right.
So Trevor, this is back to you. I'm looking at the code right now and I can't see where it specifically defines a driveway. Why is this a driveway instead of a private road?
It's a private road is a private
Because
right of way.
There's only one owner. There's only one lot owner. So it's
Okay.
just like anybody else's driveway, it's just a driveway.
It's just
That-
a shared driveway. Because
Sure.
if that in code that, well, then that would be for a road.
Right, there's
Yeah.
going to be, you know,
Yeah,
It's not unlike an apartment complex who has a shared entrance into a parking lot, right? And so it's a shared entrance into essentially a parking lot. They're calling
well,
it
I
a
understand that,
driveway,
but you guys, we keep on calling it, that this is where we're gonna be parking, this is where, and I just think that if it's just a driveway, then let's be realistic. This is bigger than a driveway, but it's a lot less than a road. And Tim, I love what you're doing. I am so happy for the single family homes. This has nothing to do with it. Again, it's just, I still see that should be a road. And I don't understand how that is just a driveway. And Brandon, you're saying it's because it's one landowner, and that does make sense to me. So I appreciate that definition. So.
Okay, any other questions?
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Sure.
After discussion with our city attorney, and then out of an overabundance of caution, even though I'm not required to recuse myself, I will recuse myself from voting on this one because I work very closely on a leadership team with one of the principals or partners in this group. So I just want to make that noted before we vote.
Thank you.
Thanks, Quinn.
Can I add something just briefly for the record? Quinn should be commended, really. He reached out to me midweek to get a little bit of, or earlier this week, to get a little bit of advice on this in advance of the meeting. He is not required by law to recuse himself in this circumstance, but I think for the appearance of the conflict, is elected to do so. And I just want to note it in the record that although not required, I think that's a commendable way to handle it.
Agreed. That's why he's our mayor pro tem.
Okay, then, and no other questions, we'll ask for a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 20-03 final plat with phasing and associated agreements for Peterson Farms PUD at approximately 6950 South, 475 East by applicant Tim Grubb.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we'll start with the roll call vote. Councilman.
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Tim, and thank you. I
Appreciate
think it's
Thank you.
I like it. It's a good subdivision.
it. Oh, thanks.
And I can see the dream that you had and that you put it together to meet that. And I think that's going to be good for a lot of different people, and that's great. And I also want to make one mention on the assisted living. As I go around to the different committees and boards and cities that I go to, there's been several people come up and say what a outstanding place that is, that it's very well operated, very well ran, and most of them most of them have said that they've had, relatives there, their mom or dad or aunt or uncle, and so it is an asset to South Weber. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Wanted you to know that, because that's
We
good.
appreciate that.
You can pass that on.
Yeah. I was gonna mention, you were asking about development costs earlier. We had some significant impact fees when we built the care center there, and I thought they were exorbitant and just ridiculous. But I actually called Kaysville and Layton, and South Weber City was actually much less. So just to give you an idea.
Thanks, Tim.
Tim, have a good night. Don't eat or drink anything.
Stay away from the fridge, the pantry.
Okay, we'll move on to our reports. New business. Anyone have any new business they need to bring up?
I do.
Ooh,
Always. So just kind of as a top level, keeping you guys informed on it, say like 30,000 foot level.
Oh,
Well, we
I
weren't gonna-
told you that we're not using that one anymore.
Until we find a new one.
New one.
No. We received the results of the adult leagues that we had been looking at, and the survey that we had sent out to see if there was really any appetite with the citizens to have some adult teams instead of just the children's. We put a whole list together of a bunch of different options. The 3 or 4 actually hottest and the ones that we're going to investigate quickly here is an adult pickleball league. So pickleballers, Tim, you will be involved in that, I'm sure. A softball league. And we actually have quite a few people to actually field a couple of teams for that. Isn't that what it is? Volleyball, and then a surprising one, cornhole. The idea now, so that we don't think that we're just now going and spending a whole lot of money getting new sporting events, is that we're now going to look at the individual cost of each one of these and base the fees that we will be charging for these on that. So the idea is this should be a wash. We'll be able to still provide more events for kind of adult league. This is to kind of help the community bond together a little bit better and to have a little bit more fun on the activity. So we're moving forward towards that. Hopefully we'll have some things to be able to announce and to show people. And who knows, this spring may be a little bit more fun for the adults. Also, we did finish on the park side our end of the year tour of all of the parks that we are now going to be able to use to make a 5 to 10 year plan based on the usage of the parks, some of the demographics surrounding the area for what people would like, and see what needs to be maintained and then what needs to be improved so that we can try to give a little bit more recreational to everybody in the city. So, and stay within budget. And so those are my 2.
Okay, so council reports, and anyone else have anything they'd like to report on the committee?
So we do our reports.
We're doing council.
So we
choose
did
new
new business.
We
I was
did
gonna
the
say
council.
something, Joe, but I didn't want to be rude.
You should have.
So being how Joel started us on that, now we'll move over to Haley.
All right. So Code Committee met today. Jeremy, I'll have you know, we had a very productive meeting today and one that was highly needed and has been needed for a long time. We sat down and went over our conditional use code, which has been ginormously lacking for numerous years and was desperately needing an update. We don't really have a really good code for conditional uses. So we sat down, went over all of those bullet points. We're about halfway through and anticipate finishing our next code committee meeting of finalizing that and getting it onto the planning commission. And they'll review whatever changes we made and our uses as well as some fixes. Is that all correct? 3 things coming your way, okay? Were you listening? Okay. And so that was really great. What else am I missing? That was it of code.
Do you want to talk on public safety?
Oh, yeah. Public safety, we met with the Davis County Sheriff's Department. Goodness, that was about a month ago, correct? We were able to sit down with them regarding a new contract. It looks like we are able to basically kind of keep the same situation that we have going on right now. They are going to be able to logo, is that what they called it? Logo the cars?
They're going to.
Decal the cars.
Decal the cars so we'll actually have our own South Weber City cops and they'll have South Weber City on there.
Davis County Sheriff and South Weber.
South Weber. So we will have our same 2 officers, so they will get to know our community members and their shifts will alternate. So they don't get too predictable and people know when there's cops in South Weber, but for the most part, it will stay. There was an increase because there was an increase in pay for all of police officers. They went up $4 just recently. And so that cost got passed on to South Weber City. They're not charging us any extra. They just passed it on to us. So it was a little bit more